Have you ever sat by the window early in the morning, watching the world wake up, and felt a deep stillness within you? That moment, when the house is quiet, the phone isn't ringing, and there's no one around needing your attention, can feel peaceful. Or it can feel lonely. Especially after 65, when friendships may have faded or routines have shifted, that quiet can be unsettling. But what if I told you, hidden in that silence is something beautiful, a kind of strength we rarely talk about, the quiet power of independence? Let me tell you about Alice. She's 72 now, living in a cozy home in a quiet suburb. Most of her closest friends moved away, and a few, sadly, passed on. At first, Alice feared those empty afternoons and solo walks. But over time, she discovered a rhythm to her days that felt deeply satisfying. She began planting herbs on her kitchen windowsill, reading the novels she had collected for years, and even started journaling her thoughts. What she found was not loneliness, but space to hear her own thoughts, to follow her own pace, and to grow in ways she hadn't expected. Our society places a lot of emphasis on being socially connected. And yes, friendships are valuable. But after a certain age, not having as many friends doesn't mean you're failing at life. It could mean you're entering a new stage, one where your sense of worth, joy, and peace starts to come more from within than from outside. This video isn't about giving up on friendship. Not at all. It's about recognizing that your relationship with yourself is just as important, and sometimes even more nourishing, especially after 65. There are subtle, powerful gifts that come with being more independent. And today, we'll gently uncover 5 of those gifts. The quiet ways you can grow, heal, and thrive beyond friendships. So if you've ever felt that empty space and wondered what to do with it, stay with me. You might just discover it holds more than you ever imagined. Paul had always been the life of the party. Backyard barbecues, Sunday brunches, poker nights. If there was a gathering, Paul was at the center of it. But when he retired, and some of his longtime friends moved to be closer to their children, those social circles slowly dissolved. For a while, Paul felt lost. The house was too quiet, and the days stretched longer than he liked. But one day, almost by accident, he picked up an old guitar from the closet. He hadn't touched it in years. Strumming the strings awkwardly at first, something shifted in him. It was like greeting an old friend, not a person, but a part of himself. There's something uniquely healing about learning to enjoy your own company. It's not about being isolated or giving up on people. It's about realizing that your presence is enough. After 65, this realization can be powerful. When social expectations ease and you're no longer rushing to meet others' needs, there's finally time to reconnect with parts of yourself you might have ignored for decades. Maybe it's art. Maybe it's puzzles, reading, writing letters, or gardening. These aren't just hobbies, they're gateways to self-expression. They help fill your days with meaning that doesn't depend on anyone else. When we enjoy our own company, we also stop fearing time alone. That fear turns into freedom. Studies in geriatric wellness have shown that seniors who spend some intentional time alone, doing something they enjoy, often report lower levels of anxiety and greater overall life satisfaction. This kind of self-comfort builds emotional resilience. It teaches us that we don't need constant interaction to feel alive. Sometimes, a quiet morning with a cup of tea and a notebook can offer more peace than a crowded room ever could. Paul didn't stop talking to friends, but he no longer depended on them to feel whole. The music became his sanctuary. His evenings weren't silent, they were filled with melodies he created for himself. And that's a lesson worth remembering. Your own company can be a gift, not a gap. Janet, 69, spent most of her life putting others first. She was the dependable one, the friend who showed up, the neighbor who helped with groceries, the sister who always listened. But when some of her old friendships faded and her children got busy with their own lives, she began to feel a void. She was still giving, but the people she once leaned on weren't there in the same way. That's when she started asking herself a powerful question. What do I want? That question may sound simple, but it's revolutionary, especially after 65. For many of us, friendships and social groups often shape our decisions. Where we go, how we spend time, what we believe. But independence gives you the chance to recalibrate your internal compass, to choose based on your values, not just your social ties. It could be small decisions, like whether to spend your Sunday in the garden instead of attending that monthly book club you've outgrown, or larger ones, like choosing to downsize your home, move to a new city, or pursue a long delayed goal. These choices, made independently, foster a deeper sense of agency. And that's where growth happens. Research in developmental psychology supports this. When older adults are given space to make decisions for themselves, without external pressure, they often experience a boost in confidence and mental clarity. It's not about rejecting advice or relationships. It's about trusting yourself again. Janet started taking early morning walks without planning them around anyone else's schedule. She changed the way she decorated her home. Bold colors, new art, not to impress guests, but simply because she liked it. She began making decisions not for anyone else, but because they brought her joy. When you're no longer relying on friendships to guide every move, you begin to hear your own voice more clearly. And that voice, quiet as it may be, often knows exactly what you need. Solitude isn't something many people seek, especially not after a lifetime of shared meals, shared stories, and shared laughter. But solitude, when embraced instead of feared, can be a powerful teacher. Let's look at Irene. At 75, she lives alone by choice. It wasn't always this way. She lost her husband 8 years ago, and for a time, she tried to recreate her social life to fill the space he left. Lunch dates, senior center activities, game nights, she stayed busy. But despite the noise, she still felt something missing. Eventually, she allowed herself to sit in the quiet, even when it was uncomfortable. What she found was unexpected, not sadness, but clarity. In solitude, she began processing things she hadn't fully grieved. She began to write down her thoughts, to speak aloud to herself in the kitchen, to sit on the porch at dusk, and simply listen to the wind. That silence became a space for healing. There's a resilience that grows in people who learn to sit with themselves. Studies have found that seniors who embrace periods of solitude often report greater emotional balance and a deeper sense of peace, even in the face of loss or health challenges. It allows you to face life without constantly needing outside reassurance. Solitude also sharpens your focus. Without the pull of conversation or obligation, your thoughts become clearer. You start to understand what really matters to you and what no longer serves you. This is something friendships, as beautiful as they are, sometimes distract us from. In our effort to stay connected, we often lose sight of our own needs. Irene didn't give up her friends. She still visits them. But now, she treasures her time alone just as much. She's learned to navigate both, not as opposites, but as companions in her journey. Independence isn't about choosing solitude forever. It's about letting solitude shape you, strengthen you, and steady you when the world gets noisy again. When friendships dwindle or shift, one of the most challenging parts can be the lack of feedback. No one to say, "You're doing great," or "That was a good idea." But this challenge is also a gift in disguise. It gives you the opportunity to define purpose without needing applause. Take Ronald, age 78. He used to lead a local church group. After retiring from that role, he found his phone didn't ring as often. At first, he felt forgotten. But instead of withdrawing, Ronald began writing reflections based on his years of ministry. He didn't post them online or send them to friends. He just wrote them, quietly, for himself. That gave him more peace than all the praise he'd once received. Purpose after 65 can look very different. It doesn't need to be public, social, or celebrated. It might be as small as cooking a meal for yourself with care, planting flowers that only you will see, learning something new, not for performance, but for joy. The freedom from needing approval can be incredibly empowering. You begin doing things simply because they matter to you. You're no longer bound by trends, opinions, or expectations. This kind of inner directed purpose builds true independence, not just in action, but in spirit. Gerontologists have long noted that seniors who find purpose in internal goals, things that aren't tied to social validation, tend to feel more fulfilled. They're also more adaptable when external circumstances change, like the loss of a friend or mobility. Ronald eventually shared his reflections with a small group of seniors at his care home, not to gain praise, but because it felt right. But even if he hadn't, his days were already full of meaning. Friendships may offer mirrors, but independence offers you a window, one that lets in the light of your own purpose. If you've made it this far, thank you, not just for watching, but for allowing yourself to explore this tender topic, the quiet power of growing beyond friendships. Friendships are still beautiful. They still matter, but they don't define your value. After 65, your worth doesn't depend on who calls you, how many people visit, or how often you gather. Your worth lives in you, in how you spend your time, how you speak to yourself, and how gently you move through each day. Independence is not isolation. It's deeper than that. It's the slow, steady return to your own wisdom. It's choosing what matters without needing permission. It's finding joy in small things, meaning in your own thoughts, and pride in how far you've come. Maybe you see yourself in Alice, or Paul, or Irene, or Ronald. Maybe you've been resisting the quiet, afraid of what it might reveal. But what if the quiet is exactly where your next chapter begins? Not a chapter of loneliness, but of gentle strength. You don't need to walk away from friendship. You just don't need to fear what comes when you're alone. That's where growth often lives, in the still spaces where only your voice echoes. If this message spoke to you, I invite you to share it with someone who may be in that same space. And leave a comment below. Tell me, what have you discovered about yourself in your quieter years? I read every message, and your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And of course, if you'd like to stay connected, consider subscribing to Elder Insight. Here, we honor the wisdom of aging, not by rushing, but by listening and growing together. You are not alone. You are simply becoming more of who you truly are.